Hello everyone, it's Andrew from Gem TCG here, and in today's video I'll be talking about the 4 best niches or industries to be in the Pokemon reselling hobby or business. And I'll kind of break them all down and talk about why some are better than others and some of the negative parts of each part of the industry, and help you decide which one is best for you. Because for most people, it's best to pick one and stick with that rather than try to do all 4 at once, because that could be really hectic and slow down your progress a lot. And if you focus on one rather than trying to do multiple at a time, you will do a lot better in the long run, and it will be a lot more simple to keep track of everything. And I do have a bias because I am in the singles, like the raw singles industry, with like just selling ungraded English singles as like the main product, and then sometimes I do a little bit of graded, sometimes I sell like Japanese cards, but 90% of my sales are from non-graded English singles. Also, if you need help starting and growing your eBay and TCG Player stores, I have a Patreon and the link is in the description. That being said, I will start with that kind of group. So group number 1 will be English or maybe even Japanese raw singles in the $5 and up range. And this one is my personal favorite because it's what I've been doing for the past 3 years. I've done other things like selling sealed product or bulk, and I found that this one is the best considering how much sales and dollars in profit I can make with the least amount of time possible. And the way this one works is that you basically buy collections at a certain percentage of the market price, and then you just list them all as singles at a slight markup to make a profit. So what that could be with specific numbers would be like buying a collection of 100 cards that's maybe worth $1,000 for $700, which is 70% of the market price. Then you'll go on eBay and list them all individually for at least market price. I do around like 30% above market price. And I've explained how that works in my other videos if you want to check that out. And basically you just rinse and repeat that as many times as you want. It usually needs like a decent amount of capital, because when you're buying collections, people typically have like 50 plus cards at a time. Sometimes there's very expensive cards in that collection and they'll want a higher percentage, like 80%. But you, of course, could start doing smaller collections. Like you could buy like a $100 collection with just a few cards, or you could buy lower end collections that people just want to get rid of at a lower percentage, which would take more time, but maybe you can get more profit since you're paying like a lower percentage. And the reason why this very good is because you don't have to get a huge amount of inventory. You could start with like 10 cards and just rinse and repeat. And the more you sell, the more you're able to buy, and the bigger collections you're able to buy, which will then grow your store even more, and you will have a huge storefront if you continue doing this for a year or more. And another great thing about it is that you get to deal with a lot of the cool cards, like the alternate art, secret rares, special illustration rares, stuff like that, compared to maybe dealing with bulk cards that aren't as desirable and fun to deal with. For example, the other day I bought a $4,000 collection of all alternate arts and some older first edition holo rares, and going through stuff like that can be really fun, especially if it's unique cards that you haven't seen in a while. It's always a good time going through those type of collections. So in terms of the amount of time you would need, this field is probably the best one because it requires the least amount of time. In terms of capital needed, I would say it's around the better tier, but it's not number 1 because there is a different field that's better than this one in terms of the amount of capital you would need. And in terms of sales and profit, I think this is the number 1 field to be in, because you will make the highest percentage of profit and dollar, or not the highest percentage, but you'd make the highest dollar amount of profit, and you're able to easily control your pricing that you pay and the price that you sell it at. And then the other thing is the churn rate. And I think this one is not the best because buying a whole collection and then listing them all as singles can take quite a while, and you won't always have a buyer for cards that you list. Like some cards I'll list for a year before it sells, and usually I think my average sale time is like a month or two before it actually sells. From like the day I list it to the day it sells, it's around a month or two, I would say, on average. So you don't get the quickest of sales, but that's why it's so important to rinse and repeat, like buying collections and listing them, because if you list a collection in January and then it takes 2 months to sell, it'll sell, let's say, March or April. And then you buy another collection in February, takes 2 months to sell, that would be April to May. And then you keep doing that loop over and over, and it will start to get to the point where sales just keep rolling in as you buy more cards and list them. And the best platform to sell your English ungraded singles are on eBay. I would not recommend making your own website to sell the English singles because most of the time it's very low end cards, and the price and time commitment to making your own website to do that would be too much. Whereas eBay, you get guaranteed traffic and buyers. Fees aren't crazy. Like, I know 13% people think that's a lot, but it actually is not. And it's worth it with the amount of benefits that eBay will get you. You could do TCG Player, but I find that English singles in the $5+ range aren't the best on TCG Player because you could get more value when you list them on eBay. And it's worth the time to list on eBay because they are above $5. If it's below $5, then definitely list them on TCG Player. But if it's above $5, I would not recommend doing that. And you could also sell them in Facebook groups, but that requires a lot of haggling and a lot of people trying to negotiate and waste your time. So I would not recommend doing that unless you're willing to put in a lot of time to that and talk to a lot of people to make sales. And the way that you could source inventory, if you want to be in the raw English and Japanese singles field, is through Facebook groups. Like you can make a post in a Facebook group, say you're buying collections at 70% market price, and 9 times out of 10 you will find a bunch of people message you with a TCG list ready, and they just want to get rid of their collection at once. And if you're able to be professional and a good communicator, like don't waste their time and don't try to take advantage, and also be pretty courteous and concise when you're messaging. Don't message them and then wait like 24 hours before you message them again. Try to get a deal done within like an hour if they're responding as well. Of course, if they're not responding, you don't have to be pushy, but don't make people wait when they are selling you their collections because most times they will find someone else. But that's about it for that field. So next we'll be talking about something similar, which is English bulk cards. And what I consider bulk is commons and uncommons, rares, hollows, and the lower end ultra rare cards like V, EX, V Max, V Star. So the way that works is that you buy bulk from people that have a bunch of cards that they don't need. So if someone's opening packs, maybe they open like a few booster boxes, they'll get a ton of bulk that they want to just get rid of because either they find no value in it or it's just taking up a bunch of space that they need to get rid of and they want to get some extra cash for it. And what you do when you get that bulk is you go through it to find all the competitive cards and then list those on TCG Player. And then with the excess cards that aren't competitive or are not popular characters, you will list them in bulk lots on eBay. And this is a good duo because you can get a high profit percentage wise with the singles that you list on TCG Player. And then you get a little bit of extra profit from selling the rest of the cards in bulk. So let's say you buy 1,000 cards for $10 and you find maybe like 5 trainers that are worth $2 each. You will break even on that $10, and then the rest of the cards you're able to just sell as a bulk lot, and it's basically all profit at that point if you do the math. You won't always find cards that are worth $2 in there because most people, or like some people, do take out the valuable cards from their bulk. But in instances where people don't take out the valuable cards from their bulk, you will find like dozens of cards that are worth $2 and up if you're buying big enough collections. And this is actually how I started off my business. I was dealing mainly in bulk because I didn't have a lot of capital to start. Like I only started with $500 in the beginning, and I had a lot of time because I started during the COVID like peak. And then this was able to grow my store a lot because I was able to learn the processes of buying and selling collections, and then learning how to ship packages to people, dealing with customers, and all that with a low risk because these cards only costed me a penny each. So then being able to sell it for $2, even if I got scammed, like they said it never arrived, or if it got damaged, I could refund them and be comfortable knowing that I only technically lost a penny for the card and then whatever the shipping cost was. Whereas if I were to start off doing the first method I talked about, which is the English singles, if I only had a few $100s to spare and then I shipped a card for $60 and someone tried to scam me out of it and I lost $60, that would be very bad for my storefront, and it probably would have made me stop doing it altogether. So starting off by selling bulk will definitely be a great way because you get that experience and knowledge in shipping practices, customer service, listing cards, and all of the like everything that's involved with this business, but you get it at a low risk because the inventory is not too expensive. And the benefit of that is you could take, like I said, a 1 penny card, sell it for $3. And if you rinse and repeat that a few hundred or like 100 times a week, if you're buying big enough bulk collections, that's like huge money, especially when you have only a few $100s to start. And the number one place to list these competitive cards with bulk is TCG Player, and then the bulk lots you do on eBay. And I broke this down in my pinned video of how to deal with Pokemon bulk. So watch that if you want more details about this. And the way you could find bulk is through Facebook groups again, and also going to your local stores. Sometimes they have a lot of bulk that they want to get rid of, especially if they have extra. So always look around, always make posts with your rates. You have to have like a rate sheet that shows what you're paying for each rarity. Like for example, I'm paying $8 per 1,000 cards of commons and uncommons, 3 cents per foil, 35 cents for an EX card, and like stuff like that. So then when people are selling you their bulk, they can count it out and then let you know exactly what they're selling you, and you could send them a price based on those numbers. And this will make it much more efficient when dealing with sellers because if they don't know what to tell you that they're selling, they probably won't deal with you because they can't just have 1,000 cards laying around and then expect to just ship it to you and have you figure it all out. Because one, that puts a risk for the seller because they could get scammed, and two, it's just an unprofessional transaction. Like you want to be very professional when you're doing this part, and having clear bulk rates would make it a lot more attractive for people to come to you rather than someone else. And overall, I would say in terms of capital to start, this is the number one thing because you need the least amount of capital. In terms of profit, I think it's kind of hard to tell because technically it's the highest percentage wise, but it's the lowest in terms of dollar amounts. So I would say it's kind of in the middle because you can't make the highest amount of profit with this, but you can make the highest return on your investment. So it's like a bit of a gray area with that. It's kind of up for you to decide. And the only negative thing about this is that it's very time consuming. Going through thousands of cards per day is not the most fun thing, and it's really tedious to go through them all, and you kind of have to memorize which cards are expensive, and then you have to list them all on TCG Player. The bulk lots part is a little bit time consuming, but if you get the process down, you could do like 50 in an hour, so that's not too bad. But going through the bulk is definitely very time consuming, and you should expect like quite a few hours per day if you get like multiple thousands of cards per day. So that's the only negative thing about this field. But overall, I would recommend this to anyone that's just starting off or anyone that doesn't have a lot of capital, because I think it's the best field to be in for those type of people. And next up is one of the hardest ones to get into, which is selling sealed product. And the reason why I think it's hard to get into is because, one, you need a ton of capital, and two, you would most likely need a distributor in order to be able to get the product at a decent price to then flip it on eBay or on your own website. Because if you were to buy it from like a random person on Facebook, they are going to upcharge you above distributor pricing most likely, unless you're in a bear market, and the room for profit would be very low, if it's even possible at all if you're buying like that. And basically the way this process works is it's pretty simple. You just buy the booster boxes or ETBs, stuff like that, from a distributor, and then you go ahead and relist it on eBay. And this works with English product, and then for Japanese product you could find a Japanese vendor and have them ship it to you from Japan, and then do the same thing, which doesn't require a distributor, but it does require kind of taking a risk because you're dealing with someone overseas that you don't know, and most times they require you to pay up front, which can be pretty scary. So definitely make sure you find like a trusted seller that people have vetted for you. And this field can definitely bring in the highest dollar amounts. Like you'll make a huge revenue number, but your profits would be extremely low compared to that revenue. However, if you do it at a super large scale, even if you get the smallest profit percentage, you can make a huge amount. And for example, there was a video, I think it's like a year old, of Pokémon talking about how he made $5 million in 1 year selling Japanese booster boxes, but the profit on that was 300,000, which is still insane. Like 300,000 from selling Pokemon cards is extremely good. But if you were to do the math on that, it would be probably like 5%. I'm not sure how the numbers work, but it's a very low percentage wise. But 300,000 is a huge amount dollar wise. So if you have a huge amount of capital and are willing to make those big investments to then sell them on your own website or on eBay, then this is the best field for you, because you don't have to deal with cards and listing individual cards. You could just buy 1,000 booster boxes of Surging Sparks and then list them all at once and let them sell. So in terms of time and dollar profit, I think this is the best one to be in. But in terms of the risk and profit percentage, I think it's probably on the lower end. And the only negative thing with this is that you need a huge amount of capital to start. Like you can't just buy, if you have $1,000, you can't just buy 5 booster boxes and then flip them and try to repeat that, because if you get like one return or one scam, you're done. Like you lost all of the money in the beginning. And of course, if you get to a high enough scale and you get scammed for one box, that's nothing. But in the beginning, it's very risky to do that. But another good benefit of this is that if you have a lot of capital and you get a huge amount of inventory of sealed product in, you could be able to like hold off in the bear markets and do something like what Rudy did with the bathroom story, where he just held on to all of his XY era boxes because the market was so low and people weren't buying them at all, even if he charged like probably below MSRP at the time. So you could do that and then hold on to it until it eventually goes back up in price, and you'll make like a huge profit doing that. And the last thing or field that I will talk about for this video is selling graded cards. So buying a card raw, grading it yourself, and then selling it on eBay. I personally think this is like the worst industry or like field to be in, because it's a huge gamble. You can't guarantee what grade you're gonna get. You're basically risking all of your capital on the hope that you get a 10, and then you have to sell it on eBay for a higher markup. And I've tried this before. Like I've graded dozens or actually probably thousands of cards at this point, and every time I do it, I feel like bad at the end of it because I'll grade a card or I'll grade like 100 cards, and then maybe 5 of them get a 10, and I'm able to turn a $100 card into $200. But then you get like 90 cards, well, not 90, but you get a huge amount of cards that are a 9 or lower, and then you basically just threw away $15 grading all of those cards. So then when you think about it, that $15 that you wasted grading the card to just get a 9, even if you made a huge markup on the other cards that got a 10, it balances out and you end up making no profit from the grading process. And you end up most times probably just losing money because sometimes a 10 isn't even worth the markup. Like if it's a $50 card and you get a 10, it might be $100, but then you just spent probably $20 grading the card. You have to ship it there, get it shipped back. So that's 2 shippings that you have to pay for. You probably had it locked up for like 2 months in the PSA getting it graded. And then you got to ship it to the seller once it sells. So you're paying 3 shipping prices, paying a fee to grade the card, and then you're risking all of it on the fact that on the hope that you'll get a 10 for most of the cards. So in my opinion, I think this is the worst one to be in. And I know some people are they always talk about how they make so much money doing this method, but I truly don't understand how it works. Like every time I've tried to do it, it's never worked out for me. I spend hours like closely looking at the cards to see which grade it'll get, or like to try to filter out to only pick the cards that I think would get a good grade. And it's just way too time consuming, way too risky, because one, you're locking up your cards for 2 months and you never know what's going to happen within that time period. And you're also risking money on the fact that, or on the hope that it'll get a 10. So overall, this is my least favorite one. If you were to buy already graded cards and then resell them, that's a different thing, because then it's like you know what you're buying. You have control over that. You can control what you sell it for. And it's the same as the English singles field that I talked about, but just at a higher scale because graded cards are more expensive. So that is fine. But buying them to grade yourself and then resell them is not a good idea because it's just very risky and way too time consuming. And that time and money could be invested in a lot better ways. Like instead of, if you were to grade 100 cards, that's $1,500 plus the fees and the shipping just on grading it, when you could just buy $1,500 worth of cards to resell. So it's like you're risking $1,500, or you could invest $1,500 to make a guaranteed profit. And that's just my opinion. Obviously, let me know if you think I'm wrong or if you have a different opinion and if it's worked for you. But in my experience, doing this for 3 years, I don't recommend this to anyone. Unless it's like a super rare card or like the Umbreon VMAX and you think it's like pristine condition, then it's worth risking the grading fee. But if it's like below $200 market price, I would not risk grading the card. I'd rather just sell it raw, because if you get anything below a 10, it's basically worth the same as the market price, if not worse. So in terms of time, I would say this is right around there with the bulk, because instead of like having to go through 1,000 cards, you have to go through 10 cards, but you have to go through them for like 5 minutes each, or maybe 2 minutes each. But it's like very tedious, and you have to be very precise when you're looking through these cards, and then you have to go on PSA's website, make an entry, type in all the cards and find them, and then it's just way too much time commitment. It's probably worse than the bulk one, actually. In terms of profit, you could, if you get lucky, make a huge profit if you get a bunch of 10s on expensive cards. But if you do this long enough, it's probably the worst one in terms of profit, because you will get burned on some submissions that you do, and where you get like 90% of them are 9s and below. And I know this video is going to be titled like the top 4 best fields to be in, but this last one is not the best. I would not recommend doing this to anyone. But if you were to just buy and sell the already graded cards, then it's different. So I guess that would be what I would talk about. And the way you do that with the buying and grading already or buying already graded cards would be to do the same thing that I said with the raw cards. And you make a post on Facebook, say you're buying graded cards only at 70%. And then people will message you with the cards they have, you find a price, and then you just buy from them and then you resell it. But the only annoying thing is with graded cards, it's a lot harder and more arbitrary with the pricing, because some people could list a graded card for a super high amount. And if you're selling it, you would use that price to justify what you want for it. But if you're buying the card graded, you'll look at like an eBay last sold auction that sold way below market, and you'll try to use that to justify what you would pay for the card. And then it leads to a lot of negotiation and haggling, and it's just very time consuming. But if you enjoy doing that, then definitely choose that path. But yeah, those are my top 4 fields to be in the Pokemon reselling industry. If I had to rank them, I would say number 1 is buying and reselling collections, like English singles that are not graded. Number 2 would be tied, actually, depending on the amount of capital you have, between buying and selling sealed product and then buying and flipping bulk as singles and then doing the bulk lots, because they are both very good, but they are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Because with bulk, you need a lot of time, but you can't, it's works if you have not a lot of capital. And for the sealed product, it works if you have a ton of capital and maybe not as much time. And then last would be buying collections to then grade the cards and sell them graded. But before that would be just buying and flipping already graded cards, because that's a different story. But yeah, I hope you guys found this video helpful, and I'd love to see what you guys are in. So comment that down below, and especially if you watch till the end of this video, because this is kind of a long one. So I really appreciate that. And also, there will be a giveaway when I get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to be opening boxes and giving away the hits from them, so stick around for that too. But yeah, thank you all for everything. Peace.